Sometimes the worst night of your life becomes the beginning of everything you never knew you needed. The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday night. You know the kind, where it sounds like someone is throwing rocks at your window. Jake had just gotten home from his 12-hour shift at the hospital. Being a nurse wasn't easy, especially working nights. His scrubs were wrinkled, his feet hurt, and all he wanted was to fall into bed. But sleep wasn't coming easy these days. Ever. Since his mom passed away 6 months ago, the apartment felt too quiet, too empty. He'd moved here thinking a fresh start would help, but honestly, he barely knew any of his neighbors. Just the usual polite nods in the hallway. As he was heating up some leftover pizza in the microwave, he heard it. Crying. Not the kind you try to hide, but the kind that comes from somewhere deep inside. It was coming from upstairs, apartment 4B. That was the young woman with the dark hair who always carried art supplies. He'd seen her a few times, usually rushing somewhere with paint-stained fingers. The crying got louder. Then there was banging. Not angry banging, more like frustrated, desperate banging. Jake turned off the TV and listened. Something was definitely wrong up there. 20 minutes later, his doorbell rang. Jake looked through the peephole and saw her standing there, completely soaked. Her hair was dripping, her clothes were wet, and she was shivering. She had a small bag clutched in her hands. "I'm really sorry to bother you," she said when he opened the door. "I know we don't really know each other, but I need help. My apartment is flooded. The pipe in my bathroom burst and there's water everywhere. My landlord won't answer his phone, and the emergency maintenance guy says he can't come until morning." Jake could see past her into the hallway. There was water seeping out from under her door. "My phone got wet and won't turn on," she continued, her voice shaking. "I don't have anywhere else to go. My family lives 3 states away, and I can't afford a hotel right now. I know this is weird asking a stranger, but..." She started crying again. Not the dramatic kind of crying you see in movies, but the exhausted, scared kind that happens when everything goes wrong at once. "Come in," Jake said, stepping aside. "You're freezing." She hesitated for a second, then stepped inside. Water dripped from her clothes onto his wooden floor. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm Lisa, by the way. I live right above you." "Jake. And it's okay. Let me get you a towel." While Jake went to his closet, Lisa stood in his small living room, still dripping. She looked around at his simple furniture, the medical textbook stacked on the coffee table, the single photo of him and his mom on the bookshelf. "Here," Jake said, coming back with his biggest towel. "The bathroom is right there if you want to get out of those wet clothes. I think I have an old t-shirt that might fit you." Lisa nodded gratefully. "I have one dry dress in here," she said, holding up her bag. "Everything else is ruined. My paintings, my furniture, my laptop, everything." As she spoke, Jake realized this wasn't just about a burst pipe. There was something else. The way she kept looking at her phone even though it was dead. The way she flinched when she mentioned not being able to afford a hotel. The fact that she was completely alone with no one to call. "Take your time," he said gently. "I'll make some tea." While Lisa was in the bathroom, Jake tried to process what was happening. He was naturally a private person. He helped people at work, sure, but that was different. This was his home, his space. But something about the way she'd looked at him, not flirty or manipulative, just genuinely scared and alone, made him want to help. He could hear her moving around in the bathroom, and then it got quiet. Too quiet. "You okay in there?" he called out. "Yeah," came a shaky voice. "I'm okay." But she didn't sound okay. She sounded like someone trying very hard not to fall apart, completely. Jake had seen this before at the hospital. People in crisis holding it together just long enough to get help, then collapsing once they felt safe. He'd learned to recognize the signs. When Lisa finally came out of the bathroom, she was wearing a simple black dress that came to her knees. Her hair was still damp but combed back. She looked younger somehow and more vulnerable. "I made tea," Jake said, gesturing to the couch, "and I called the building's emergency line. They'll have someone here first thing in the morning." "Thank You. Lisa sat down carefully like she wasn't sure she was really welcome. I promise I'll be out of your way as soon as possible. I know this is weird. It's not weird, Jake said, even though it kind of was. It's just life happening. Sometimes, we need help. Lisa wrapped her hands around the warm mug and took a small sip. For the first time since she'd knocked on his door, she seemed to relax just a little. I keep thinking this has to be some kind of bad dream, she said quietly. This morning I woke up in my own bed, in my own apartment, thinking today would be just like any other day. Now I'm sitting in a stranger's living room with everything I own either destroyed or... She trailed off. Or what? Jake asked gently. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, let's just say the pipe bursting wasn't the only disaster in my life today. Jake didn't push. He'd learned at work that sometimes people needed to share in their own time, in their own way. Instead, he just sat there, drinking his tea, letting her know she wasn't alone. Outside, the storm was getting worse. Jake had given Lisa some blankets and told her the couch was all hers. He'd even found an extra pillow from his closet. But as he lay in his bed an hour later, still wearing his work scrubs, he could hear her moving around in the living room, not trying to get comfortable but restless moving. The kind that happens when your mind won't shut off. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain still pounding against his bedroom window. His shift at the hospital had been brutal. 3 emergency cases, 2 difficult patients, and a family that had screamed at him for 20 minutes because they didn't like how long they had to wait. All he wanted was to sleep and forget about today, but sleep wasn't coming. Maybe it was because there was a stranger in his living room. Maybe it was because he kept thinking about the look in Lisa's eyes when she'd said the pipe wasn't her only disaster today. Or maybe it was because his apartment hadn't had another person in it for months, and the presence felt both strange and oddly comforting. Around midnight, the sounds from the living room changed. Instead of restless moving, he heard something that made his chest tighten. Quiet crying, but not the kind from earlier. This was different, panicked, like someone who couldn't breathe properly. Jake sat up in bed. He'd seen enough panic attacks at the hospital to recognize the sound. The quick, shallow breathing, the little gasps between sobs. He got up and walked quietly to his bedroom door. Through the crack he could see Lisa sitting on his couch, but she wasn't lying down. She was sitting straight up, her hands pressed against her chest, breathing way too fast. "Hey," he said softly, opening the door a little wider. "You okay? Out there?" "I'm sorry," Lisa said quickly, trying to wipe her face. "I didn't mean to wake you. I'll be quieter." But Jake could see she wasn't okay. Her hands were shaking, and she kept looking around his apartment like she was trapped. "You're having a panic attack," he said, walking into the living room. "It's okay. They're scary, but you're safe." "I can't breathe," Lisa said, her voice tight. "I keep thinking about everything that happened today, and I can't make it stop. My brain won't shut off." Jake sat down in the chair across from her, not too close but close enough that she could see him clearly. "Look at me," he said gently. "We're going to breathe together, okay? In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. Just like I do it." He started breathing slowly and deliberately, counting out loud. At first, Lisa couldn't match his pace. Her breathing was still too quick, too shallow. But after a few minutes, she started to follow his rhythm. "That's it," Jake said. "You're doing great. Just focus on the counting." It took almost 10 minutes, but eventually, Lisa's breathing started to slow down. The panic in her eyes faded, replaced by exhaustion. "Better?" Jake asked. Lisa nodded, but she still looked fragile, like she might fall apart again at any moment. "I'm sorry you had to see that," she said. I'm not usually such a mess." "You're not a mess," Jake said. "You're someone who's had a really bad day. There's a difference." Lisa was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Can I ask you something? Why are you being so nice to me? You don't even know me." It was a good question. Jake wasn't usually the type to get involved in other people's problems. He helped patients at work because that was his job, but in his personal life he mostly kept to himself. Ever since his mom died, it had been easier that way. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe because I know what it feels like to be alone when everything goes wrong." Something in Lisa's expression changed. Not surprise exactly, but recognition. "When my mom was sick," Jake continued, "I spent months taking care of her. And after she died, I realized I didn't really have anyone else. No siblings, no close friends. Just me and this apartment and my job. So when I saw you standing at my door tonight, completely alone, I guess I remembered how that feels." Lisa was studying his face like she was trying to figure out if he was telling the truth. "What happened to your mom?" she asked quietly. "Cancer. She fought it for 2 years, but..." Jake shrugged. "She died 6 months ago. That's actually why I moved here. Couldn't stay in the old place anymore." "I'm sorry," Lisa said, and Jake could tell she meant it. "That's really hard." They sat in comfortable silence for a minute. Outside, the storm was finally starting to calm down. "My husband left me today," Lisa said suddenly. "Well, I left him, but he made it clear he wanted me gone. He changed all our passwords, froze our bank accounts, told me I had until tonight to get my stuff out of our house." Jake felt a wave of anger on her behalf. "That's terrible. The worst part is I saw it coming for months, maybe even years. But I kept thinking if I just tried harder, if I was more supportive, if I didn't complain about the way he treated me." She shook her head. "When I got to the apartment tonight and saw all that water, all my paintings ruined, I just lost it. Like the universe was telling me I don't deserve to have anything good." "That's not true," Jake said firmly. "Bad things happen to good people all the time. It doesn't mean anything about what you deserve." Lisa looked at him with something that might have been hope. "You really think so?" "I know so," Jake said. "I see it at the hospital every day. Some of the kindest, most wonderful people get dealt the worst hands. It's not about deserving, it's just life being messy and unfair sometimes." Lisa pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Thank you for saying that, and thank you for helping me breathe. I haven't had a panic attack in years, but tonight was overwhelming," Jake finished. "Anyone would be overwhelmed." As they talked, Jake noticed that Lisa seemed different than she had earlier, less guarded. Like the panic attack had somehow broken down a wall she'd been keeping up. "Can I tell you something weird?" she said. "Sure. This is the first real conversation I've had in months, maybe longer. My husband didn't really talk to me, not about anything that mattered. And I don't have many friends anymore. I lost touch with most of them after I got married." Jake nodded. He understood that kind of isolation. "Well," he said, "you're having a real conversation now." Neither of them slept much that night. After the panic attack, Lisa had moved to the floor beside the couch with her pillow and blanket. She said the couch felt too soft, too much like a bed, and she couldn't relax enough to sleep on it. Jake understood. Sometimes when you're overwhelmed, the floor feels safer somehow. He'd gone back to his room but left the door open. Not because he didn't trust her, but because he sensed she needed to know someone was nearby. Every hour or so, he'd hear her shifting around and he'd call out softly, "You okay?" And she'd whisper back, "Yeah, I'm okay." Around 5 in the morning, when the first light was starting to creep through his living room windows, Jake gave up on sleep entirely. He got up and found Lisa sitting by the window watching the sunrise. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "I keep thinking about what I'm going to do," Lisa said. "Where I'm going to live, how I'm going to pay for anything. My husband had control of all our money and I was stupid enough to let him. I have about $200 in my personal account and that's it." Jake made coffee and brought her a cup. He sat down in his chair and they both watched the city wake up outside his window. "What kind of work do you do?" he asked. "I teach art classes at the community center and I sell paintings when I can, but it's not exactly a steady income. Before I got married, I worked at a gallery downtown. But Tom, my husband, said I didn't need to work anymore. Said he wanted to take care of me. Lisa made a bitter sound. Turns out what he really wanted was to control me. That's not your fault, Jake said. Some people are really good at making their control look like love. Lisa looked at him with surprise. You sound like you know something about that. Not personally, but I've seen it at work. People come into the emergency room with injuries they try to explain away. Or they come in for panic attacks and anxiety, and when you start asking questions, you realize the person they live with is the source of their stress. They drank their coffee and watched people start their normal Wednesday morning routines. People walking dogs, heading to work, living their regular lives. It felt strange to Lisa, seeing all that normalcy when her whole world had fallen apart in 24 hours. What about you? She asked. Have you always been a nurse? No. I used to work in an office. Accounting, actually. But when my mom got sick, I spent so much time in hospitals that I started noticing how overworked and understaffed the nurses were. They were the ones who really took care of her, you know? The doctors would come in for 5 minutes, but the nurses were there all day and night making sure she was comfortable, explaining what was happening, just being human. Jake paused, remembering. After she died, I realized I wanted to do something that actually mattered. So I went back to school, got my nursing degree. It was hard going to classes during the day and working part-time at night to pay for it, but it was worth it, Lisa finished. Yeah, most days anyway. Lisa pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. I've never met anyone who changed their whole career to help people. That's really amazing. It's not that amazing. I just wanted to do something useful with my life instead of just pushing papers around. But Lisa could tell he was downplaying it. She'd been around enough people who only thought about themselves to recognize when someone genuinely cared about others. Can I tell you something? Lisa said. Of course. Yesterday morning, before everything went wrong, I was thinking about ending my marriage. I'd been thinking about it for weeks, actually, but I was so scared. Not just of being alone, but of not knowing how to take care of myself. Tom handled everything. Bills, bank accounts, even my taxes. I felt like a child pretending to be an adult. Jake nodded, encouraging her to continue. When he came home and saw me packing my art supplies, he went crazy. Started yelling about how ungrateful I was, how I'd never survive without him, how no one else would ever want me. And the terrible thing is, part of me believed him. Part of me thought maybe I should just stay and try to make it work. What changed your mind? Lisa was quiet for a moment. He threw one of my paintings across the room. It was a painting of my mom's garden from when I was little. I'd been working on it for months, trying to get the colors just right. And he threw it like it was garbage. Jake felt that familiar anger rising in his chest again. What did you do? I looked at my painting on the floor, all torn and ruined, and I realized that's exactly what he'd been doing to me for 3 years. Taking something good and beautiful and destroying it bit by bit. So I finished packing and left. That took a lot of courage. It didn't feel like courage. It felt like desperation. Lisa smiled sadly. But maybe that's what courage is sometimes. Being so desperate that you finally do what you know you should have done months ago. They were quiet for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. Then, Lisa said, Jake? Yeah? Thank you for not asking me why I stayed with him for so long. Most people ask that right away, like it should have been obvious. It's never that simple, Jake said. And besides, you did leave, that's what matters. Around 9 in the morning, Jake called in sick to work. He'd never done that before, not unless he was actually sick. But something told him Lisa needed someone on her side today, and he was the only person available for the job. You don't have to do that, Lisa said when she heard him on the phone. I'll figure something out. I know you will, but you don't have to figure it out alone. They spent the morning on the phone with Lisa's insurance company, trying to file a claim for her flooded apartment. Then they called the landlord, who was surprisingly understanding, and agreed to let her out of her lease without penalty. Jake helped her make a list of things she needed to do: find a new place to live, get copies of important documents, figure out how to access her own money. "This is so overwhelming," Lisa said, staring at the list. "I don't even know where to start." "One thing at a time," Jake said. "That's how you eat an elephant." "What?" "Old saying my mom used to tell me. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time." Lisa laughed. The first real laugh Jake had heard from her. "Your mom sounds like she was wise." "She was. She would have liked you, I think." "Why do you say that?" "Because she always said the strongest people are the ones who ask for help when they need it. And she was right about most things." Around noon, the maintenance guy finally showed up to fix Lisa's apartment. Jake went upstairs with her to assess the damage. It was worse than she'd described. Everything was soaked: her furniture, her clothes, her art supplies. Dozens of paintings were ruined beyond repair. Lisa stood in the middle of her destroyed apartment and started crying again. But this time, Jake didn't hesitate. He put his arm around her shoulders and let her cry. "I'm sorry," she said after a few minutes. "I know it's just stuff, but some of those paintings, I worked on them for years." "It's not just stuff," Jake said. "It's your life's work. Of course you're upset." As they salvaged what they could from her apartment, Jake found himself thinking about how different this day was from what he'd expected. He should have been sleeping off his night shift, maybe doing laundry, definitely not helping a woman he barely knew rebuild her life. But somehow it felt like exactly where he was supposed to be. 3 weeks had passed since that stormy night, and Lisa was staying in a small studio apartment across town. It wasn't much, just one room with a tiny kitchen and a bathroom that barely fit one person. But it was hers. Jake had helped her find it through a friend of a friend who worked in real estate. More importantly, he'd helped her get her own bank account and figure out how to live independently again. They'd fallen into an easy routine. Jake would stop by after his night shift sometimes, bringing coffee and pastries from the bakery near the hospital. Lisa would show him whatever she was working on. She'd started painting again, small canvases that fit in her tiny space. They'd talk about everything and nothing, the way friends do when they're comfortable with each other. But on this particular Thursday morning, their quiet friendship was about to get complicated. Jake was sitting at Lisa's small table watching her mix colors on her palette when someone started pounding on her door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind of aggressive banging that makes your heart race. "Lisa!" a man's voice shouted from the hallway. "I know you're in there. Open this door, right now." Lisa went completely pale. The paintbrush fell from her hand. "That's Tom," she whispered. "That's my husband." "How did he find you here?" Jake asked, standing up. "I don't know." Lisa was shaking. "I was so careful. I didn't tell anyone where I was living except..." The pounding got louder. "Lisa, I'm not leaving until you talk to me. You can't just disappear and think that's okay." Jake looked at Lisa, who seemed frozen with fear. In 3 weeks he'd watched her gain confidence, learn to handle her own problems, start to believe in herself again. Now she looked like the scared woman who'd shown up at his door that night. "You don't have to open it," Jake said quietly. "But what if he doesn't leave? What if he keeps making noise and bothers my neighbors? I just got this place. I can't afford to get kicked out." The shouting continued. Jake could hear other doors opening in the hallway, people coming out to see what was happening. "Let me talk to him," Jake said. "No," Lisa said quickly. "You don't understand. Tom gets really angry when he thinks other men are, when he thinks I'm..." But Jake was already walking toward the door. Not because he wanted a confrontation, but because he could see Lisa was about to have another panic attack, and someone needed to handle the situation. "Sir," Jake said through the door, "you need to stop shouting. You're disturbing the whole building." The pounding stopped for a moment, then Tom's voice louder and angrier. "Who the hell is that? Lisa, who is in there with you?" Jake opened the door, but only a little, keeping the chain lock on. Tom was a big guy, probably 6'2", wearing an expensive suit. His face was red with anger. And when he saw Jake through the crack in the door, his expression got even worse. "I knew it," Tom said, his voice full of rage. "I knew there had to be someone else. That's why you left, isn't it? You were cheating on me." "I'm just a friend," Jake said calmly. "And you need to leave. Now." "A friend?" Tom laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. "Right. My wife disappears in the middle of the night, and now there's some guy in her apartment at 8 in the morning. Just friends." "It's not what you think," Lisa said, appearing behind Jake. "Jake helped me when my apartment flooded. He's been a good friend, that's all." "Don't lie to me," Tom shouted. "I've been looking for you for 3 weeks. Do you have any idea what you've put me through? People at work asking where my wife is. Your art teacher friends calling the house wondering why you missed classes. You embarrassed me." Jake felt his temper rising. This guy was more concerned about being embarrassed than about whether his wife was okay. "She doesn't owe you an explanation," Jake said. "You're not married anymore." "We're still legally married," Tom shot back. "And I don't remember anyone asking for your opinion." By now, several neighbors had come out into the hallway. Jake could see an elderly woman peeking out of her apartment, and a young couple with a baby were standing by the stairs watching the whole scene. "Please," Lisa said quietly. "Both of you, just stop. Tom, we can talk, but not like this. Not with you yelling and making a scene." "Oh, now you want to talk?" Tom said. "After 3 weeks of hiding from me? After changing your phone number and not telling me where you were living?" "I changed my number because you called me 47 times in one day," Lisa said, her voice getting stronger. "You left messages calling me horrible names. You told me I was worthless and that I'd never make it on my own." "I was upset," Tom said. "You left without any warning, without even trying to work things out." "I tried to work things out for 3 years," Lisa said. "I tried everything. Nothing was ever good enough for you." Jake watched this exchange with growing anger. He'd seen Lisa slowly rebuild her confidence over the past 3 weeks. She'd learned to pay her own bills, make her own decisions, trust her own judgment. And now this guy was trying to tear all of that down with guilt and manipulation. "Lisa," Tom said, his voice suddenly softer, more pleading. "Come home, we can go to counseling, work through our problems. You don't belong in this tiny apartment with—" He looked at Jake with disgust. "With whatever this is." For a moment, Jake saw doubt flicker across Lisa's face. The same doubt he'd seen that first night when she'd talked about believing she couldn't survive on her own. "She's doing just fine on her own," Jake said. "She doesn't need you." That was the wrong thing to say. Tom's face went red again. "And who are you to decide what my wife needs? You think because you swooped in and played hero when she was vulnerable, that makes you important? You think you know her better than I do?" "I know she's happier now than she was when she was with you," Jake said. The words came out before he could stop them. True words, but probably not helpful words. Tom looked back and forth between Jake and Lisa, and something ugly settled in his expression. "So that's what this is," he said quietly. "You couldn't even wait until our divorce was final before you moved in with someone else." "He didn't move in with me," Lisa said. "We're friends, that's all we are." But even as she said it, Jake realized it wasn't entirely true. Somewhere over the past 3 weeks, his feelings for Lisa had grown into something more complicated than friendship. He cared about her in a way that went beyond wanting to help someone in crisis. And maybe Tom could see that, even if Jake was just figuring it out himself. "Right," Tom said sarcastically. "Just friends. That's why he's here first thing in the morning. That's why he's defending you like some kind of knight in shining armor." The baby down the hall started crying, probably upset by all the shouting. The young parents retreated into their apartment, but Jake could feel the other neighbors still watching. "You need to leave," Jake said again. "You're disturbing everyone, and Lisa asked you to stop." "Lisa can speak for herself," Tom said. Then, looking directly at her, "Unless you've gotten so dependent on your new boyfriend that you can't even think without his permission." It was a cruel thing to say, designed to hit Lisa right where she was most vulnerable. For 3 years, Tom had made her feel like she couldn't make decisions on her own. Now he was using that same tactic to try to control her again, but this time it backfired. "Get out," Lisa said, her voice steady and strong. "Get out of my building and don't come back. If you want to talk to me, you can call my lawyer." He looked shocked. This wasn't the scared, uncertain woman he'd expected to find. "You don't mean that," he said. "Yes, I do. I really, really do." For a moment, Jake thought Tom might try to push past them into the apartment, but then the elderly neighbor cleared her throat loudly and said, "Should I call the police, dear?" Tom looked around at all the watching faces, seemed to realize how the situation looked, and took a step back. "This isn't over, Lisa," he said. "We have things to figure out, legal things, financial things." "Then we'll figure them out through our lawyers," Lisa said. Tom looked at Jake one more time, his expression full of hatred. "Enjoy your rebound, guy," he said. "But don't come crawling back to me when you realize he can't give you the life I gave you." Then he turned and walked away, his expensive shoes clicking angrily on the tile floor. Lisa closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. "Are you okay?" Jake asked. "I think so," Lisa said. "Actually, I think I'm better than okay. Did you hear that? I told him to leave, and I meant it." But even as she said it, Jake could see the weight of what had just happened settling on her. Tom had found her. He'd made a scene in front of her neighbors, and worst of all, he'd made assumptions about her relationship with Jake that weren't entirely wrong. "Lisa," Jake said carefully. "About what he said?" "I know," Lisa said quietly. "I know we need to talk." 6 months later, Jake was getting ready for work when he heard his apartment door open quietly. He wasn't surprised. He'd given Lisa a key 3 months ago, after she'd started bringing him dinner on nights when he had to work late. It had become their thing. She'd slip in, leave a container of homemade soup or pasta in his refrigerator, and sometimes they'd sit together for a few minutes before he had to leave for his shift. "Jake?" Lisa called softly. "You here?" "In the bedroom," he called back. "Give me 2 minutes." He could hear her moving around in his kitchen, probably putting something in the refrigerator. Over the past 6 months, Lisa had become an amazing cook. She said it was part of learning to take care of herself, but Jake suspected she just liked taking care of people. It was one of the things he'd grown to love about her. Love. There was that word again. After the confrontation with Tom, Jake and Lisa had indeed needed to talk. They'd spent hours discussing what their friendship meant, whether it was fair to each other, whether Lisa was ready for something more than friendship so soon after leaving her marriage. They'd decided to take things slowly. Very slowly. Jake had continued to live in his apartment, Lisa in hers. They saw each other 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to talk. Jake had started going to the community center where Lisa taught art classes, not to watch her work, but to take a pottery class in the same building. He'd discovered he was terrible at pottery, but loved the quiet concentration it required. Lisa had started coming to some of Jake's work events. Nothing fancy, just the occasional barbecue or birthday party for his co-workers. She'd been nervous at first, worried that people would think she was Jake's rebound girlfriend. But the other nurses had welcomed her warmly, especially after they saw how much happier Jake seemed when she was around. "You ready for your shift?" Lisa asked when Jake came into the living room. "As ready as anyone can be for 12 hours in the emergency room," Jake said. Then he noticed she was holding something behind her back. "What's that?" "A present," Lisa said, looking suddenly shy. "I know it's not your birthday or anything, but I finished something I've been working on, and I wanted you to have it." She handed him a wrapped canvas about the size of a book. Jake unwrapped it carefully and found himself looking at a painting of his hands. Not just any hands. His hands, holding a cup of coffee, with his mom's ring on his pinky finger. The ring he wore every day but never talked about. "Lisa," he said softly, "this is incredible." "I painted it that first morning," Lisa said. "When you made me coffee and sat with me while I was having my panic attack. I kept thinking about how gentle your hands were, how safe they made me feel. I started the painting that day, but it took me months to get it right." Jake stared at the painting. She'd captured something in those hands that he'd never seen himself. Strength and gentleness at the same time. The way his fingers curled around the coffee cup, the slight callus on his thumb from work, even the small scar on his knuckle from when he'd cut himself cooking dinner last month. "I can't accept this," Jake said. "It's too good. You should sell this or keep it for yourself." "I painted it for you," Lisa said firmly. "Besides, I could never sell it. It means too much to me." Jake looked at her, really looked at her. In 6 months, she'd changed in ways that went beyond just learning to live independently. She stood differently now, more confident. She spoke, up for herself. She'd even started dating, not him, not yet, but other people. She'd gone on 3 dates with a guy named Alex who worked at the art supply store, and 2 dates with a woman named Robin, who she'd met at a coffee shop. Jake had been surprised by how okay he was with Lisa dating other people. Not happy, exactly, but okay, because he could see that she needed to know she had choices, that she could attract people who treated her well, that she wasn't dependent on him for companionship or validation. "Jake," Lisa said, sitting down on his couch. "Can we talk about something?" "Of course." Jake sat down next to her, still holding the painting. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately, about what we are, what we want to be." Jake's heart started beating faster. They'd had versions of this conversation before, but something about Lisa's tone suggested this one was different. "I know we agreed to take things slowly," Lisa continued, "and I'm grateful for that. I needed time to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to make someone else happy all the time. I needed to know I could take care of myself, make my own decisions, be okay on my own." "And now?" Jake asked quietly. "Now I know those things. I know I can pay my own bills and handle my own problems. I know I can be alone without falling apart. I know I'm not the same person who was so scared and dependent that she stayed in a bad marriage for 3 years." Lisa paused, seeming to gather her courage. "But I also know that I don't want to be alone, not because I need someone to take care of me, but because I want to share my life with someone who gets me, someone who makes me laugh, who challenges me to be better, who I can take care of too." Jake felt like his heart might beat right out of his chest. "Lisa," he started, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish. I know this is complicated. I know people might think it's too soon after my marriage, or that we're just trauma bonded from that first night, and maybe some of that is true. But I also know that what I feel for you isn't gratitude or dependence or rebound feelings. It's love. Real love. The kind where I want to know about your day and help you through bad times and celebrate good times together." She took a deep breath. "The question is, do you feel the same way? And if you do, are you ready to try being more than friends?" Jake set the painting carefully on his coffee table and turned to face Lisa fully. "I've been in love with you for months," he said quietly. "But I was scared to say anything because I didn't want you to feel pressured or think you owed me something because I helped you that night." "You were scared?" Lisa said, smiling a little. "Terrified. What if you said no? What if I ruined our friendship? What if you weren't ready and I pushed you away?" Lisa reached over and took his hand. "What if I said yes?" she asked. Jake looked down at their joined hands. His hands that she'd painted with such care and attention. Her hands that were small but strong, with paint permanently embedded under her fingernails. "If you said yes," Jake said, "I'd probably kiss you right now." "Well," Lisa said, moving closer to him on the couch, "it's a good thing I'm saying yes." When Jake kissed Lisa for the first time, it felt like coming home. Not the desperate, needy kind of homecoming, but the quiet, sure kind. The kind where you realize you found where you belong. They kissed for a long time. 6 months of careful friendship and growing love finally finding expression. When they finally broke apart, Jake realized he was going to be late for work. "I have to go," he said reluctantly. "I know," Lisa said. "But Jake, when you get home tomorrow morning, I'll be here. If you want me to be." "I want you to be," Jake said. "I want you to be here tomorrow and next week and next month." "Good," Lisa said, smiling. Because I'm not going anywhere. As Jake drove to work that night, he thought about how much his life had changed since that stormy night when Lisa had knocked on his door. He'd helped her rebuild her life, but somehow in the process she'd helped him rebuild his too. He'd learned that taking care of someone didn't have to mean losing yourself, that love could be strong without being possessive, supportive without being controlling. His apartment, which had felt so empty and quiet for months after his mom died, now felt full of possibility, full of laughter and conversation and the comfortable silence that comes when two people know each other well. When Jake got home the next morning, Lisa was indeed there. She was sitting at his kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and a plate of toast, reading a book about art therapy that she'd checked out from the library. "Good morning," she said, looking up with a smile. "How was work?" "Better now," Jake said, sitting down across from her. And as they shared breakfast and talked about their plans for the day, Jake realized that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments. Sometimes getting caught in a storm leads you exactly where you need to be.